This is Carl Wescott, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Did you ever think that any of this craziness would ever happen in your life? Like, what a crazy thing that you guys find yourselves embroiled in.
It was not on my lifetime bingo card to be in a lawsuit with a pop star. No.
A pop star who's apparently has a penchant for buying properties from the very elderly, and it's just this seems like such an avoidable thing, man. Okay, so let's just back up. I've kind of cold opened everybody here, but why don't you give us the background as to why we're talking?
So, about 3 years ago, sort of take yourself back to COVID times. My father had purchased a house in June of 2020. Within 6 weeks of purchasing that house, he was under contract to sell it to basically an agent of Katy Perry's. And the fact pattern around this that makes it so disturbing is that my dad has a diagnosis of Huntington's disease, which he's had since 2015. It's a progressive brain disease that includes among its symptoms dementia. So, he was over, 5 years into sort of his diagnosis, and he had recently had back surgery about 4 days before the house had gone under contract. So he's already has issues with dementia. He has spinal fusion surgery, which is a 8-hour back surgery. And then 3 days later, really a day after, a real estate agent was already, hitting him up to essentially buy the house on behalf of Katy Perry. And so in this very short interval from the time when he had this surgery and was on, opiates, gabapentin for nerve pain, drugs for Alzheimer's, as well as dementia, in addition to his Huntington's chorea, he's taking all these as they call it, polypharmacy, a cocktail of drugs. So he's taking all of these, and he has the underlying dementia, going on. And it was during this period where, we feel like he was taken advantage of, and he certainly did. And so, 2 days after there was a contract form, he said he had stopped taking the opiates on the advice of his doctor. And he said, "Oh, guys, like, wait a minute, I don't know what happened here. But like, I'm terribly sorry. I can't sell you my house. I'm 80 years old. I literally just bought this thing. I don't want to move." And they said very nicely at first, "Please, would you sell us the house? We want to raise a family." And we said very politely back, "No, we don't." And then the next word we heard was from their lawyers. And so at that moment, you kind of stop and say, okay, what are the options that they could have taken? What are the things they could have done? And there was a million different choices, right? I mean, she could have very easily walked away and just bought another house. Her lawyers could have said, "Look, we're out some money here. This is not a fair situation. Would some money settle the deal?" Any of those situations would have been fine. But to say demand specific performance and have litigation go on for 3 years, cost them millions of dollars, us millions of dollars, it's ridiculous. There was no reason to do it, and no normal human would do it. And I'll be honest, we're not dealing with a normal person here. Yeah. Once you're part of that Hollywood machine and you have been enabled by it, and you have all these people around you that feed off of it and make money off of it, and anything that they can to satisfy or desire you have, no matter how wild or consequential to the lives of other people, they're happy to do it. And so, yeah, she does have this penchant for, buying houses from, people in tough situations. And it's unfortunate. I can't help but wonder, is there something psychologically about preying on the weak that she gets off on, because she has a consistent pattern of behavior of doing this. So I know I've gone on for a bit, but that should set.
Right. It's an emotional topic, and for how I feel during all of this, your dad is reaching the end of his life. It's not been gentle, and this stuff. Anybody who's going through it, we're going through this. Several of my friends and families, we're all dealing with dementia and end of life type things, and it's already enormously challenging. So to have to drag people into court, and
I think that's right, and to me, it's like we should be charitable with these people. Right. We should be like, I'm not saying defer to them anyway, but we should be very charitable. We should give them the benefit of the doubt. If you get into a contract with an old man and a day later, he says, no, like, I'm sorry, I had a senior moment, something like that. Like, what's the big deal? There's a million other houses she could buy. And it's just, it doesn't make any sense. And that's not how we should have a society. And frankly, for someone who, holds himself out as a role model and pretends that their entire persona is about love and compassion, she's shown none. It's ridiculous. So she's a hypocrite.
If I'm lending Katy Perry and Orlando Bloom counsel, I'm going to say, hey, this doesn't ever play well. You've been through this before. One of the nuns, she died in a court proceeding, literally. And so
there are memes out there that my dad might die as a result of being in this lawsuit. That's what she's putting my family through. None of us we didn't choose this.
Why not just gently sidestep? Or again, like you say, take any number of other avenues, have your agent talk to your guys' agent or whoever runs the estate and say, how about giving us first right of refusal? Like if you guys want to do something with the house later on, maybe we can make you an offer later. Maybe, who knows what? Like we're glad to wait.
When we first went to them and asked for, hey guys, like what can we do here? This is a messed up situation. Their response was, we will accept nothing less than total capitulation. And I will add, they said, if you doubt our tenacity in litigation, look at the Nunn case.
Yeah.
That's what they said to us. So these are the sort of vile Hollywood scum lawyers that we're dealing with. Greenberg Traurig, absolute Hollywood scum, enabling Hollywood, terrible, bad people. I can't say enough how poorly they have acted. And, and it's a sad thing to see the profession of like being a lawyer dragged down to this level. There's a great quote from Abraham Lincoln where he talks about, being a peacemaker is the height of being a lawyer. That's the best thing you can do in the profession. And these people are so far from that. It's just disgusting.
I can understand like that house is something, but again, like this is a person of tremendous, unlimited means in effect for a house, right? That you can just buy another house. They already own a house in Santa Barbara. And we're saying Santa Barbara, Montecito. Yeah. So,
and she's spending, I don't have an exact figure, but a lot of money renewing one, remodeling one that she bought just 2 months, October after these events took place. Like, so lady,
if I'm a judge, I have to look at this. I swear to God, if I'm a judge, and I'm not a judge, but if I'm going to judge this, I'm going to look at their case and say, you guys have been in this room before for a similar thing. Maybe not this court, but you stood in front of a court and argued this. You've entered into another agreement with someone like this, and it started to go sideways. How did we end up here again? How did you guys end up here again?
Because there's slime.
Yeah, well.
I'm not kidding. Like, let me tell you how slimy they are. They accused my brother on the stand of we made up Huntington's disease for this case. That's exactly their question was, isn't it true, Mr. Westcott, that you and your brother just made up this whole Huntington's disease for this case? Yeah. Oh yeah. We got one of the world's premier experts to diagnose him with it in 2015, all for the purposes of screwing over Katy Perry somehow. You guys are ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, it's disgusting the slime that we've had to deal with because this. And I don't use words like this lightly, by the way. I mean, these are
I understand.
These are accurate words I'm using.
It's avoidable, right? Like, how do you end up in front of a judge? And then, if you're a lawyer, you have to be perfect. If your case is even 50-50, like you give the judge any inkling that there's any kind of, something other going on. I don't know. I don't know. It's just unfortunate you guys are having to do. Where are you guys at in the legal process right now?
So both sides have rested. Closing arguments are November 3rd. And so you will, we still have that. And then the judge has said that he may rule that day, or he may rule as long as a couple of weeks later after. And so then if he rules for us, that's the end of the case. She will, of course, given her litigious nature, she will appeal, goes without saying. Right. And so then, we'll have that hanging over our heads further. But frankly, given the manner that, and I just want to give a shout out to the judge. Like, I think he's done a great job being fair in this case. And I don't think there will be, this is me speaking as a lawyer myself, particularly many grounds for appeal. That doesn't mean she won't try. I'm sure they will.
Of course.
But I think it's been really well handled as a case. If he doesn't rule for us, if he rules for her, then there's a separate matter of damages that she's accusing, which frankly are so preposterous. I mean, we can talk about them, but she had to withdraw one of them because it was just so ridiculous. But there is that matter. So that would then happen later, and she would be forced to testify on that matter should she want to pursue them. So that's where the case is at this point.
And have you all filed a countersuit for damages as well?
So that would come under this thing in California. They have this notion of like equity. And so presumably at that point, if it went to damages, we could say, okay, like, yes, we've had the whole house the whole time. So you've lost out on rental income. We've also been paying the property taxes, the maintenance, all that. And, that would become something doable there. But as far as damages, to my father, he's had the right to be in the house. Like, we have possession of the house.
Okay.
So he's had that this entire time. Unfortunately, due to medical issues and his status, I mean, like, if you needed proof that we're not faking it, he's had a slow decline. Like, I mean, the guy was so the events in question happened roughly July 2020. By October of 2011, he was fully in a mental institution. So that's where he's been since that time. And they've like insinuated that we put him there to avoid testifying in this case. I mean, it's just disgusting what these people are willing to do and say. It truly is. I've never thought I would be confronted with the full evil that is Hollywood, like in person. But guys, it's so much worse than you can imagine. Like, it's so much worse than you can possibly imagine.
It definitely colors your opinion. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't want to throw all of Hollywood into one case because you're not suing all of them, but you're definitely seeing
it's
money
system.
and power. Okay.
It's a system. And so what you see with the agent, the guy whose name is actually on the case, Goodvie, and then you see it with the Greenberg Traurig, one of the largest law firms in the world, lawyers, and the what they're willing to do. I mean, these people have no souls, right? There's no sense of humanity. There's no sense of attempting to work out a fair compromise. They're not interested in that. They're more like, they're like reptiles. It's that part of the brain that is what is working for them. And that's about it, though.
When you're in court with these folks, I mean, like, Orlando Bloom seems like a charming and nice enough guy. I mean, on the stand, is this Katy or is this both of them? Is this the agents? Who's the person you're trying to point your finger at?
I ultimately level responsibility at her feet, 100%. Look, lawyers at the end of the day, they have to look themselves in the mirror and have a soul. And so if they've given that up, that's on them. But I certainly don't fault them for doing their jobs. Her agents, to some extent. I don't know to what extent this guy is coloring her view of things or otherwise, or how much she's even aware of or paying attention to any of this, probably very little, if I had to guess. But the initial decisions, I can promise you, to do all this, and the desire and her just saying, get me this house, that had to happen at some point. And, it's continued. And she's shown absolutely zero sympathy, empathy, emotion, compassion, none of that, zero.
Right.
So that's her whole persona. And to me, it's very telling. It's very narcissistic, of her to take this sort of view. And when he went in October of 2021, to me, that was hey guys, like, we literally just told you we had to commit him to a facility. Right. He's not living at the house now. Like, this will probably be a pretty good time to settle. And nothing. No, they're just total reptiles. Final victory or nothing. Like, that's it. So it's been very frustrating. There's another case that she's involved in with a woman named Katy Perry in Australia. And she is suing this woman who's a small business owner.
Is she the Highlander? This is so crazy, man.
Yeah, so she's suing
I'm sorry
this
to
woman,
cut you off. Yes.
And she's a small business owner. Her name's Katy Perry as well, KATIE PERRY, for trademark infringement. And the woman won the first case, and then she appealed it. But in the discovery in her case, it came out that there was an email from Katy Perry. I don't recall who it was, one of her handlers, of course. And it said something along the lines of, can't we just stop this bitch? Can't we stop this fucking bitch? So she does take a personal role in these sort of matters. But it just shows you, like, you would go after a small business owner in Australia on behalf of your fashion line trademark.
Right.
Totally unnecessary. It's picking on the weak. It's picking on the vulnerable. I mean, she has a habit of doing this, and like I don't want people to come away with anything other than a notion that this is a bad person who picks on people who are weak. And I'm happy to say, I'm not a nun. I'm not elderly. So I'm happy to get in the fight with her because a lot of these other people can't, and pisses me off.
And I don't know how Katy Perry spells her name day to day, day in, day out. And I don't know what some small business owner Katy Perry is doing, but again, like, why fight that? Like, okay, yeah, you're Katy Perry also. Cool, man. There's so many of us. Good luck to you. You know what? Let's take a picture together. There's plenty of Katy Perry power to go around, and she's not wired that way. All right, great. But again, like, you're picking these fights. This definitely colors my opinion about Katy. I don't know about Orlando Bloom, but Katy Perry for sure. I'm going to consume less Katy Perry products, I guess.
I mean, she owns Bragg's apple cider. Not a lot of people. That's kind of a common consumer product.
Right.
Obviously, she has terrible shoes and all that. So she has a shoe line and all that. And
what's the legitimate case of this?
And then Peppa Pig. She's voicing Peppa Pig, or a character of Peppa Pig. So I advise people, don't watch that.
Plenty of things to avoid. Put your lawyer hat on and tell me where your guys' case is questionable, because there's got to be. Look, otherwise this thing just gets tossed out.
Yeah, it's this is the difficulty with dementia, and anybody who's had a relative that has dementia, they still do things sometimes that are normal, right? Or that are normal for them. And so they repeat patterns of behavior that they're used to. They're normal. And these can even be somewhat, higher functioning patterns of behavior. So, for example, my dad was, upon receiving an offer, still looking at it, right? I mean, that's the sort of thing that a businessman, even if he was not of right mind, could still do. So, it's difficult for, I think, us to apply the sort of modern understanding of dementia and Alzheimer's and Huntington's dementia in any of these sort of mental diseases to, what are fact cases where now you're talking about emails, text messages, DocuSign. Like, this is a whole other conversation we could have. That DocuSign is very dangerous for the elderly. It's very dangerous, right? I mean, it's different back in the day when, hey, you had to sit down with, your attorney and, all these people and check all these things out. Like, my dad signed it 30 minutes after receiving it. And this is while he was under the influence of opiates, all this other stuff. I mean, this is a very dangerous technology that we've created. And I think that over time there will be some more safeguards built, because we've seen clear abuses. And in my case my father's case is certainly one of them.
Yeah. It's wild. The dementia thing is true, because like Glenn Campbell toured with dementia and his brain was, and I'm using the word absolutely properly here, malfunctioning.
Yeah.
But he could still play like a monster. Would forget his daughter's name on stage. If you guys ever see see his movie, God, it's heart-wrenching as you watch his mind failing him and he being these rages. And anybody who's lived through someone who has dementia, you've seen this, and then they want to be relevant. You're trying to give them these glimpses and snapshots of their life, and your dad's a businessman. He's doing business deals, and sometimes they want to pick up the phone and they want to call the whomever, or that they would call their agent, call their stockbroker, call their real estate agent, whoever it is, and they're like, hey, here's what we're gonna do, and unless you're capable of corralling that person and going, hey, my dad just no longer has capacity, and you have the legal ability to do that, which can be tough, because if your dad's a force, which I imagine he was, he's like, I'm not giving you guys total control over my life,
Exactly. It's a difficult position to be in for anybody, right? It was made especially difficult because of the fact that my dad had accomplished so much and had been so in control of his own life for basically from the time he was 7 or 8 years old. I mean, he has a kind of crazy story. Grew up in, rural Mississippi,
right.
Was born in 1939. House had no indoor plumbing. Used to walk into Vicksburg and shine shoes and sell bubble gum. That was his first job, I mean, so he was very much one of those kind of all-American stories. And to see his whole legacy, which should be something else, be tarnished by this. And this is what, people looking back, like, or Googling him 100 years from now will probably see the most about. It's a goddamn shame, and it makes me mad to no end to think that that's going to be the case, because the lessons he taught me are innumerable. And one of them was life's too short to litigate. And I am mad as hell having to litigate this, but I will absolutely do whatever I can to defend the honor of my father, who's a very honorable man and doesn't deserve anything we've been put through.
And then there's, and I guess I'm sort of guilty of this too, but then there's the folks that glom onto the story. And, I purposely did not use a picture of your dad in his hospital bed because that's widely available, but that's not the story here. Yes, that's shocking and, lurid and all that kind of thing. But, what we want to talk about is this crazy dynamic between Katy Perry and Trouble. Like, why buy this Trouble? But does it bother you that your dad is being characterized in this way as this feeble old man? And then there's a picture of the feeble old man and all that stuff. I mean, Jess, it's a legal defense, but okay.
That's what he is now. And no, so it doesn't bother me because it's, especially when their whole narrative is, oh, he was this, sharp wheeler. This is a man who is sharp as a tack. And, so it's just bullshit. And so I don't like lies. I really, that for me is fundamentally a difficult thing. And they have lied a lot in the course of this case. They've lied about procedural matters. They've lied about my father. They've lied about my family. Greenberg Traurig, the largest law firm in the world, is lying a lot about us. And if it shows that I'm not scared of them whatsoever, that I'm willing to say that, it's because I'm not, and it's because it's true. They're liars.
Yeah. Yeah. You got the truth on your side. The case then, when they say this happened and you guys are like, no, we didn't. Like, for example, it seems to me that if you're signing a legal document like a exchange of a house, which takes, I don't know, a zillion, takes lawyers, and even if you're doing it electronically, it takes a lot of signatures. If the person is under the influence of anything, like an opiate, doesn't that just cancel that contract out as soon as they go, hey, hold on, I was high on Vicodin when I was there.
I grew up in a home where I was taught, especially with business contracts, my word is my bond.
Right.
It says a lot that you can go through my dad's entire business history, which is extensive, includes, having 3 different public companies. Guys, like, he has a long business career. Not once in that entire history has there ever been a moment where he breached a contract. That's very extensive. And I guarantee you, and I said this on the stand, if there was such an incident, Greenberg Traurig, the largest law firm in the world, would have found it. This is the only one. So that should tell you something about the character of the person you're dealing with.
Right.
That he truly felt he was not of sound mind. And I'm still a believer after this that, we must do what we say, that our word is our bond, that contracts are sacred. I grew up in that Dallas business culture where you could still do business with a handshake. So I'm very strong on this. But when you start to get into the realm where someone is no longer of sound mind because of mental illness and, perhaps medical vulnerability, coming out of a surgery, there's actually a term for it that is escaping me, a medical term. But, when we start to talk about situations like that, then no, let's have a little charity here, not just in the law, but as people, we should be thinking of the elderly with gentleness and care and not treating them, the same as we should everybody else, because they're not. The data tells us they're not. By the time someone's 75 years old, there's a 15% they have dementia. By the time they're 80, it's 20%. So this is truly the word vulnerable gets thrown around a lot, marginalized. This is an objectively vulnerable and marginalized population, statistically speaking. So we need to treat them differently. We need to be gentle with them. We need to be, we need to treat them with kindness.
Yeah. Atul Gawande wrote a great book called Being Mortal, and he talks about the beginning, the first signs of dementia, and becoming demented and your decrepitude. It shows up in your 40s. It's like when the first little bing, little bits of light, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And, your esophagus narrows, all of these things known to science, and yes, some people fight it off longer than others. Okay, great. But when you hit 75, there's a change. And if you say, hey, I've got diminished capacity, sorry, everybody, but this deal is not going to happen. The easiest way out is just to go, oh, you know what? That's a pain in the ass. And like you said, you know what? That's going to cost you a couple $1 million, that mistake. And then the family can fight over a couple $1 million if they have to. But I just don't understand why they dig in so hard. Like it just seems, if it's not narcissism, I don't know what it is. It's just it's arrogance.
It's what she wants. Mm-hmm. And the machine around her exists to get her what she wants, mm-hmm. without regard for the details or consideration of other people's lives in the normal way that you, as a member of your community, might think, okay, this could hurt some people. Like, this is going to be a big pain for us. This is going to be a big pain for them. No, she's insulated from all of that, right?
Yeah.
So she just goes about her life, and maybe there's a short depot here or something there. She doesn't think about it otherwise. Now, her machine, they think about it day and night, and they're willing to do anything to get her what she wants, because that's how they stay in her good graces. That's how the gravy train keeps flowing.
Yeah.
So that's what you're dealing with here is a machine.
So when you guys get the final word here in a few weeks, what's your lawyer thinking right now? Like, where's this looking? Is it looking good? 50-50 still? What are we thinking?
I'm a lawyer myself, as I said at the beginning, and I really don't have a clue. It's difficult. Litigation is truly one of the most unpredictable things, in the whole world. So I don't have a clue how it's going to turn out. I'm grateful that it will be over, one way or another. It's been a nightmare for our family. It truly has. I've had to take a lot of time away from other things to deal with this. And
it's a sick dad.
And even when I don't want to think about it, sometimes it, pops up, and I'll be in a public place and one of her damn songs comes on.
Yeah.
It's not fun. And
it's a real assault on your privacy too.
A little bit, but I'm not a public figure. So I wasn't looking for this, but I'm not, I'll be damned if I'm going to lay down or ignore the limelight, like, just because she did something wrong. Like, I think it needs to be out there. It's an important story, not just about her, but about Hollywood, and also, about the elderly. Like, that, maybe if people will be a little more gentle with the elderly, then something good will, come out of all this. And so, that's my hope.
And it's a real, like, when you're dealing with this and you watch the incapacity come on, you're trying to be as gentle and as graceful with folks and let them be angry and mad and frustrated, because that's how you have to be when your life starts to change and you lose your independence, and you're not allowed to write your own checks, and you're not allowed to do your own dishes and all these things, and you try to give that person that you love as much freedom, because they've been independent for 80 years or whatever it is. And it's heartbreaking enough just to see them go through that, and now to have to deal with this. It is a shame, and we do lose sight of what that incapacity mentally does to someone, and how terrifying that's got to be for your dad to find out. What do you mean I did a bad deal? What are you talking about? I don't do bad deals. And then have that reality that when your dad's case, probably like, oh, I've harmed my family, I've done this dumb thing, it's embarrassing, and all of that stuff gets heaped on, and it's easily fixed by just saying, hey, let's wipe the slate clean, no big deal, we'll see you guys at some point in the future if we want this house,
Yeah, and in return for that, we would have said, hey, here's a couple $100,000. I mean, that was something we were very easily willing to do.
Right.
It was never even entertained at all.
Right.
It was never even. It was literally their exact words were, "We will accept nothing less than total capitulation. And if you doubt our tenacity, you can look at the Nunn case." That is how Greenberg Traurig approached negotiation with us. That is how their lawyers approached negotiation with us. and that's just not in the spirit of what I've ever understood as how to do business.
Yeah.
It's certainly not how I do business.
Yeah. And if you guys had just been some family from, I don't know, whatever, Torrance or something, you wouldn't be able to even fight this thing. You would have got railroaded over a long time ago.
I admire the small business owner, Katy Perry in Australia, because she does not have, very big means and, much less modest means. And she's fought it the whole way. And God bless that woman. She truly has stood up for herself and set a great, role model for her kids to see that you don't lay down for bullies like this. And for me, it's the same way. I can't look at myself in the mirror. My brother couldn't, if we just said, oh, well, hell, we're going to let you guys, ramrod us and screw my father over. Like, no, that's not what we're going to do.
Right. Oh man, it's terrible. So the one thing that could be good is this legislation that has got her name on it, if I'm not mistaken. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think some lawmakers have, thought that it might be a pretty good idea to look at, some of these problems that are occurring around contracts with the elderly, and specifically as they occur to residential real estate. And so, the concept, as I understand it, is a 72-hour right of rescission for the elderly, after the time of contract formation. So had that been in place, that would have really helped my dad out. Because, when he came out of the opiate, kind of issue, out of the haze, I guess you'd say, he would have been able to, when he said that, hey, that would have ended the matter right there. And all this, trouble we've all been through, would not have had to happen. And, I think I personally am very supportive. I think it's a great idea, and I don't see a lot of downside to it. Would it make sense for all contracts? No, probably not. But, when you think about, the baby boomers, some of them got 401ks, but, a lot of them, the majority of their biggest possession is their house. And, so we ought to give them some, a little extra time, given what we know about those rates of dementia and cognitive impairment, and just to make sure that they're doing the right thing. And, in a time again where so many people, don't live with their parents, don't live near their parents, they're living in the same town. And so that gives people a little more time to get caught up and know what's happening here. And, make sure when mom calls you and says, hey, I sold my house, that she wanted to do that, because that's a nightmare phone call to get. And and see that she made a bad deal or, something. So I think it's good legislation. And, I hope it gets passed in all 50 states. And, look, the fact that it has her name as part of it, or, as the acronym, it just adds to it, I guess. That now people will remember this as, the Katy Perry rule for real estate. That's, and you start thinking about legacies. Well, unfortunately, my dad's legacy is going to be, associated with this case. And when people Google it 100 years from now, that's what it'll be. And, who knows, when people Google her 1,000 years from now, maybe this legislation will come up, first. So, it is what it is.
We're so quick to label people things, and especially predator all the time, and I'm not condoning anybody's bad behavior, but, here she is. She's preying upon the elderly.
When you see a pattern of behavior,
you must call it out, right?
You must call it out. And she has a consistent pattern of behavior of preying on the weak. And, I personally, and this is just my personal opinion, I think she has some sort of personal animus against the weak, the elderly, perhaps those who are mentally ill. To me, that's my opinion. I believe she has that, and it may explain, a degree of her psychological, choices in life, because they're certainly not they're not reflective of what she claims that she's about, which is love, compassion, and all these things. If you go to her Twitter bio right now, it says, love is the key that unlocks the door. Well, love is the key that unlocks the door to a nightmare for my family.
To my house that I want in Montecito.
There's a great Jordan Peterson quote I heard one time, which is like, love and compassion are perfect camouflage for narcissistic serpents.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
boy, I mean, that fits her to a T.
Well, and even if what you just said, all of those things weren't true, she's left you with nothing but those guesses. Like, why would you make this? Why would you make this obvious? You are a public figure that people are adoring, and you've made yourself vile several times now. Why would you pick on a little Katy Perry? You should support every Katy Perry. Like, I wear her brand; it's great, or whatever it is that she does.
How
I buy her
genius would
fine
that
things.
have been? Yeah.
Yeah, and you're just like that. Love is the key that opens the door. This Katy Perry.
I think you're onto something with this, and it is to a degree, in my opinion, sort of a breach of the social contract between us as the general members of the general public, and them as celebrities. Like, they owe us, in a sense, to conduct themselves fairly, not any differently than anybody else would conduct themselves, but in a manner that is fair and equitable with the people they interact with, taking into account of the fact that they have enormous power in different ways. And, I'm not blind to the fact that, like, I'm taking a huge risk here going up against her. I mean, she can start talking about me at any time. And that's a power that people don't have. Normal people don't have that power to send 200 million Instagram followers on someone else with a couple tweets. That's it. So that's part of the social contract really needs to be strengthened, because we have empowered people, not all of whom are intending to use these powers that they have for good. Some who are clearly happy to use it for evil. And that's troubling to me, frankly, when you consider, we're in the infancy of social media still. It's only been around, 15, 20 years or whatever. And this is going to get worse. These powers and these concentrations of sort of social capital, and the ability to turn an entire tribe onto another, tribe or another individual. I mean, we need to, as a society, really think about it.
Yeah, it's a big deal. You're right about that. And I will say this: I know a number of celebrities and people that are very famous, and by and large, all these people are really wonderful people.
Magnanimous,
that are not trying to cause extra problems for themselves. But even they're trying to avoid problems. They are good people, but and sometimes they find themselves in impossible situations, like all of us do. That they're all people.
I would submit to you that the way she thinks of it is the same as you do when you step on a gnat or an ant.
Yeah, I'd love to step on gnats.
It's like she's squashing a bug. That's how that would, to me, be the equivalent for how she feels about this.
I know about conflict quite a lot because I've worked in that world, and there's always time for the hammer. There's always time for the hammer. You can always go to the hammer and be like, all right, that's it. That's all I'm going to take. But it just seems like they went to the hammer right away. And maybe that's the rule in this kind of law. But it's like, hey, there's 15 ways out. Your dad said it, avoid litigation, because nobody's winning this case. Nobody wins this case. Whatever amount of money is exchanged and you guys still get paid for that. There's no win here. It's like one of those things where you go to court, you win, but really you don't. You lose. So even if they win, she's still just got this vile reputation now, and this Katy Perry law that might pass, and because of her actions, we're trying to protect our most seasoned citizens, that deserve that kind of protection and respect. So I don't know. It just seems like it's such a preventable thing that there could have been, yes, an uncomfortable compromise, but this very expensive confrontation seems to be so wasteful,
Oh, I do know.
I guess you do. I guess you do. So do you guys even want the house afterwards? Like, if you guys win and everything goes your guys' way and you guys are made whole from everything else, you guys going to keep the house then, or do you turn around and offer it right back for an increased price?
No, absolutely not. So since my dad, the reason we moved him out of the house, or when he was in Dallas when he came to us and asked for, essentially medical care. He'd said, the guy's like, I'm no longer right in the head. He finally said that. And so we went, that's how he ended up in medical facilities there. We now know, right? At first we had no idea what we were dealing with. I mean, we knew that he had Huntington's, but what else? I mean, we just didn't know exactly.
Yeah.
So he had to spend a lot of time, trying to figure that out. And now we know he has, a diagnosis of Huntington's dementia as well as vascular dementia. And so those are things we know that he has. We know that he does want to go back to the house. He's expressed that to us. So it will be very difficult. We'll have to, logistically, it'll involve some challenges, but that's the goal, is to get him back into the house so he can, die there, and live, however much time he has left. And it's, we're not talking years here. It's
not at all.
Sadly,
it's months. Got a very short window.
Yeah. And so, sadly but that's the goal, is for that to be the case. That's what we'd like to do. And, when I said that on the stand, again, just to show you the character of our lawyers, they tried to call me a liar. They tried to say, well, you're not going to do that. Like, well, you're not seriously going to do that. Like, yeah, actually, guys, like I'm from a culture that may be foreign to you guys as Hollywood lawyers, but when a Texan says they're going to do something, we do it. So don't give me that crap.
One of the things about vascular dementia in general is when you look at the progression, as you go down the list, the last thing that's good is just full incontinence. Everything after that is just nothing that anybody wants. And so your dad is on this pathway that there's nothing good left in his life. And so for them to even claim that when it's medically proven, and then if it started here, if it gets diagnosed here, it happened earlier. It's off the screen, right? And this is me talking to all of us out there. You have to spend more time with your parents, looking after them and trying to figure out what's going on. Make sure that wills and trusts are in place so that you guys can take care of one another, because this stuff, as you see, it can get really complicated, and the parent doesn't want to lose control. So you've got to figure out how to balance that, but you also need controls in place so that when they do grab that phone or someone calls them and they're like, hey, here's what I want to do. Because that is there's a multi-billion-dollar market for people that want to try to get 401k money out or buy this or buy that. And there's people every day preying on old people.
Yep. They're a target. They are absolutely a target. And, I think over the long term, I think we will see more precautions put in place, both as social convention and potentially through the Perry Act, as legislation that specifically protects the elderly. And, I wholeheartedly support that, having seen what happened to my father, and I hope it's around when I'm, elderly and going.
Yeah.
So,
when you look back, did you and your siblings let your dad go free a little bit too long, or should you guys have been a little more involved in his life?
It's a complicated story because he made, as part of Huntington's disease, I don't know how much you're aware of it, but
I am aware.
There are a lot of crazy side effects, I call them side effects. They're the effects of the disease. But the disease causes you to behave very impulsively. It can be aggressive, moody, doing things spur of the moment, engaging in risky behavior. Yep. This was all things that he did. So that to a degree strained sadly our relationship. I mean, this disease is a horrible disease, guys. Like, the one thing I can say, and I try to say this publicly as much as I can, so people don't think I'm ever going to get it and my brother's not going to get it, because luckily we both got tested, which again, we're so faking this thing that we bothered to get tested in our DNA for it. We both got tested, and neither of us have enough of these repeats that cause the gene. So we won't have it, and our children won't have it. None of our descendants will have it.
That's
so
good.
Thank God for that. But
yeah.
I mean, I would say we should have probably been a little closer to him, especially during COVID times when he was completely isolated. Right. But things turned out the way they did, and in hindsight's 2020. And
sure. Yeah. But there's a lesson there for all of us. And this is one of these things where, like, if you were to actually observe your parent, I'm saying to everybody, and you saw them on a day-to-day basis, what you think is fine when they tell you, oh, it's fine. They're performing their life in a place that they control. You get them out of that, and they can't cover what they're forgetting. And they're like, what's his name? And you're like, you mean your son? And like, you start to realize, oh my gosh, or you see them doing things that are very dangerous in the kitchen. You realize unsafe for them to drive, or, and no one wants to lose their keys. And so
Totally.
there's a real thing where you have to be involved enough to understand how capable they are, and I've seen this in my immediate family group and friend group, where we're watching the degradation of these people that we love and are trying to keep them as happy and keep their life as fulfilling as we can. But it's not easy, and it requires an enormous amount of time, attention, money, and it's exhausting. It really is.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I mean that especially once you get north of 75, you've got to start checking in with them a lot,
Yeah.
probably more than you have time for in your day.
Yeah.
In your life, it's that extensive, but
Yeah.
it's
And
just strange.
Huntington's like this. Huntington's is hard because of the way it presents, and if there's a little drinking involved, it gets crazy.
With him, he got divorced from my mother at a very late date, and then that of course led to a renewed interest in women specifically, of the type that are not interested in him for
Right.
his good looks and charming wit, which he did have a lot of that for a 75-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
but it was obviously the money, and
Yep.
so that led to a wedge in the family, because I was certainly not going to be around that when I love my mother very much and respect her too much as a woman.
Right.
And so we ended up seeing him less because we wouldn't be around him when he had this frankly gold digger around, and
Yeah.
she and I only say all this publicly, guys. Like, this is stuff I don't want to talk about because it wasn't him.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, you're talking about
It's the disease. Yeah.
It's the disease. And so I don't feel like I'm bad mouthing him when I talk
Right.
about this stuff, because it was his disease. It was not him at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. When the disease speaks, whether it's Huntington or dementia, and it's not just like they get forgetful. It's their ability to process life is diminished, and so they get obsessed about one thing. And even if that one thing isn't even a thing, they can't let go of it, or whatever it is. And so their brain is truly malfunctioning and
I
inventing.
saw him take a shower. This is, roughly October 2021,
Yeah.
right around the time he went in. He tried to take a shower with scalding hot water over and over and over again. And every time you would get him out, he'd try and go back in.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is the type of behaviors that occur as things get further down the road.
So you're making it up.
Oh yeah, we're just making. Yeah, exactly. Come on, ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, look, I wanted to hear this story because I wanted to be able to calmly talk about it with you and give you a chance to chat about it. It's just crazy. And again, like I don't live Katy Perry's life, so I don't know. I can't speak for her. It just seems like it's an avoidable thing, especially if you'd already been in this pickle before. You don't brag about it and use that as your standard of victory.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I mean, that was exactly what they said
around here.
If you doubt our tenacity in litigation, look at what we did with the Nunn case. Well, all right, Katy. Now, I mean, the whole world's seen that. They've seen how you treated the small business owner. They've seen how you mom shamed the woman on American Idol. They've seen what you're doing to my family and my father. We don't doubt your tenacity. It's your compassion we're worried about.
Yeah, it's despicable behavior for sure. That's a clear word for it. Despicable, and it's disappointing, frankly. Because I want her to be the roar lady, and she
look, a whole lot of it could be the frustration. She sees Taylor Swift selling out, all these stadiums and all that, and she's just having little pity parties and feeling sorry for herself, and needs to take it out on the whole rest of the world. But
I don't know. I mean, it's I don't know how competitive she is, but it's Katy Perry's let me down. I really wanted her to figure out how to get out of this thing without doing this, but she hasn't, and so here we are. What do you want to say in closing? Is there anything else you want to make sure you get a chance to get off your chest? Because this is
we've done good. I mean, we've covered a lot. This is the first time I've ever talked about it in this sort of long format. And so I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do that. And, I think we've covered a lot about how I feel about it.
Yeah.
I would just tell people, like, talk to your state representative, your congressman about, the Perry Act and, what, that could potentially do in terms of, being positive, letting something positive come out of
Right.
what has been just a very, unnecessary, unfortunate situation. So, that's probably my only closing message. And just as you said, if you have parents, grandparents living, check on them all the time, make sure they're okay. Don't assume that their mental state is good just because, they're telling you that from a phone call. Like, you really need to look into it and see how they live. I like your point on that. See how they live.
Yeah. Because they're trying to perform for you that they're okay, even if they don't think that they are, because
it's totally performance. Yeah.
Right.
No, because they don't look, I mean, nobody wants to deal with the consequences of losing your own mind.
Right.
No,
I
mean, it's terrifying. Yeah. It's terrifying to me, but we all have to realize, and that we're all going there, and the timeline for exactly when you arrive there is not going to be clear to you, and it's not going to be clear to the people around you. So you got to be very vigilant, and again, you make great points about being prepared, wills and trusts, all that kind of stuff, and then at a certain point, like power of attorney. And that's easier for people to do with someone, not like my dad.
Yeah. That's the other thing too, is getting in front of it, because you do reach a point where it gets to be too late. They're not of sound mind anymore,
Too late before somebody might prey on them.
Well, that too also. And I got to say this too, because this is going to become a reality when we all see our parents go through. I don't want to put my daughter through this. I don't want to jeopardize her relationship with anyone else. And, I'm not trying to early out myself, but if I get this kind of a diagnosis, I am going to pick a date and I'm going to go to Switzerland or wherever I can humanely do it. And we're going to call it quits, because I know what's on the card, as it goes down, and none of it is stuff that I want to pay for or, have anybody spend their life doing it, and we haven't reached that point. And that's not for everybody, but, all of this stuff, presence with your older folks, make sure that you're there with them, looking after them, and let them know it's okay. It's read that book by Atul Gawande, Being Mortal. It's amazing. It talks about all of this stuff. Like, when you talk to your dad in this case, and if you're able, right, like having a challenging relationship with your father. That's me too. My dad's passed away. The guy who raised me, my father. But you have to talk through it. And if you can't talk through it, then okay, that's where you're at. But that's your one shot. Not your one shot, And so anyhow, I don't want to keep any longer. I appreciate you coming on and trying to go through this and echo your words that look out for one another and just look out for one another. All right, anything else before I wrap this thing up?
No, Pete, again, thank you so much, man. This has been great.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by